Just to quickly give you a small synopsis of how this will proceed, we'll have about 20 minutes of a presentation by Dr. Ram Narayan, who's a specialist in neurosurgery, both working with Indian organizations as well as overseas organizations of repute, and member of Society, Neurological Society of India, Association of Neurological Surgeons, various other professional organizations. So he'll be broadly taking about 20 minutes going through a presentation on basically on spasticity, its symptoms, how it can be managed, as well as some advances in spasticity. So during such time, we would request you to store or hold on to your queries, or if you like, you can put it in the chat box. And after about 20 minutes, then we will open it up for discussions and conversations. That is the broad format that we are going to have here. I will be recording this presentation and I'll be probably editing it later to make it a shorter presentation for about 5 minutes, which will also go onto our channel, as well as a presentation of Dr. Ram Narayan. Okay, so over to you, Doctor. I'm just making you now the host, and then we can take it further from there. Okay. Yes, I've made you the host, Doctor. So you can start with your presentation.
Yeah. So how do I you get this thing, no? Video. Video, you get one this thing you get, no? Start video, something like that. For the slide. Hello. Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you now, Doctor.
Yeah. Now I got it. Now I got the share screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Jayanta is also here. Hi, Jayanta. And Anandi is also here now. Great.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, can you see the slides?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, so I will make it big.
Hello, good evening, sir.
Good evening, everyone. We are just starting well in time.
Okay, so I'm sure all of you can see the slides, isn't it?
Right.
Great. Okay. Good evening, friends. Thank you, Hardeep, for this occasion. And let me start by telling you that I'm basically a neurosurgeon, but I am specialized in what's called restorative neurosurgery. That is, through various surgical methods, I restore a lot of lost nervous functions. And one of the things is for spasticity, which is a very common problem in stroke, in cerebral palsy, and so many other conditions. So I will briefly take you through how spasticity is managed by a team, that is a neurology, neurosurgery, physiatrist, all these people. Okay. So what is spasticity? So there may be some medical slides, but don't worry about it. I will explain it in for you to understand. By definition, it's a muscle disorder characterized by a velocity-dependent increase in tonic stretch reflexes that result from abnormal intraspinal processing of primary afferent input. That is, normally in our muscles, there is an amount of what is called a tone or a strength. Without the strength, we will just collapse and fall on the ground, and our hands won't move. This tone is controlled by the brain, where it keeps the tone in perfect order so that the tone does not increase or tone does not decrease. But in people who have problems with the control, that is when the brain is damaged or the spinal cord is damaged or there's a nervous damage, the tone can be affected. When the tone is increased, it is called hypertonia, and beyond a particular level, it is also called spasticity. Hypertonia is the tone is always increased, but in spasticity, the tone is increased only when there is a movement. So that is why it is called velocity-dependent increase in the tone. So that is why it is called spasticity. The classical example you see is when, I'm sure all of you have felt when we are carrying a small child who is sleeping, he or she always feels heavier than when they are awake. I'm sure all of you have experienced this. So how do you assess spasticity? The only way to assess or know spasticity is by clinical assessment. Just brushing through the causes, the commonest we see is cerebral palsy and stroke. Then you get what is called as hypoxic encephalopathy. That is loss of blood supply to the brain for a time. This is seen in conditions like hanging, drowning, things like that. Then there are some neurological disorders like multiple sclerosis, severe head injury, spinal cord injury, and then other degenerative neurological diseases like amyotrophic lateral sclerosis and things like that. How do you measure spasticity? Spasticity is measured by what is called as the Ashworth, modified Ashworth scale. This is from 0 to 4. 0 is normal, you and me. And 1 is slight increase, 1 plus, 2 plus, and 3 and 4 are called severe spasticity. What are the effects? Spasticity can cause stiffness of the fingers, arms, and legs. Muscle spasm, we call it flexor spasm, which is very, very painful. In fact, yeah, I've seen people with paralyzed legs, no sensation, nothing but crying of pain because of flexor spasm. Overactive reflexes, especially urine control. So a lot of people have difficulty in controlling their urine and motion. Then there's something called clonus. That is, your hands and legs work like a spring, especially the legs. So this causes difficulty in walking. When the spasticity is high, you get clonus. Then obviously pain and changes in posture. So what is the problem with spasticity? Spasticity does not allow the physio to improve the weakness of the limb. So years of physio may not help. That is, when there is a paralysis of one side of the body or both the legs or all the limbs, both upper and lower limbs, initially you have only weakness, because weakness happens because there is no control of the brain or the spinal cord on the muscle. But over a period of time, this spasticity develops, as I said earlier, because of the loss of control. Okay. So just to explain further, suppose I want to touch the computer screen. Suppose I am coming and touching the camera. What happens is some muscles have to work and some muscles have to give way. That is, these muscles, the front muscles in the front have to work, and the muscles in the back of my hand has to give way. But when both of them start working together, like some of our political people, then when everybody starts working together, then it becomes a problem. So your hand won't go. It will be stiff like that. That is how you get the spasticity and all the problems with the spasticity. Other effects include a clenched fist, bent elbow and arm pressed against their chest, and stiff knee with pointed foot. This you can see in stroke. You can see patients like this. The hand is they cannot move the hand. Spasticity in leg can make it difficult to walk, affect balance, and cause falling. It also increases tiredness or fatigue because it's harder to move. The complications usually include urinary infection, constipation, fever, frozen joints, and pressure sores. That is, we call it bed sores. How do you diagnose and treat? Diagnosis by clinical assessment using the modified Ashworth scale. Usually we do MRI and some other tests, but this is for the primary diagnosis. That is to find out if there is, for example, if there is multiple sclerosis, you have to do MRI, like that. Treatment is always by a multidisciplinary team of physiatrists or physical medicine doctors, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, neurologists, psychologists, psychiatrists, neurosurgeons, and social workers. All these people together have to work together. Then only the treatment will become good. Treatments are basically divided into non-surgical methods and surgical methods. Non-surgical methods should always be tried first. Physiotherapy involves the stretching and strengthening exercises focusing on large muscle groups, and also helps in preventing contractures and wasting. But physiotherapy is not very effective and could be very painful in the presence of severe spasticity. Whereas occupational therapy is used for the small muscle groups like the hand and the fingers and all that. And the speech therapy is used for people who have difficulty in talking because of the spasticity of the throat and the neck muscles. Then some people use also the braces and casts and all to prevent falling down and all that. Medicines are used for spasticity: baclofen, benzodiazepines, dantrolene sodium. Drugs are usually used in combination with other therapies or medication. That is, you should not do drugs alone and leave out the rest. You should always use drug along with physical therapy, occupational therapy, things like that. Oral medications are only used if symptoms interfere with daily functioning. Among these, baclofen is one of the most commonly used, and it is seen to have, its only drug seen to have some benefits in some patients. The rest of them, the two of them, of course, they are used for other indications also. Generally, they are not very effective. But the biggest problem with oral baclofen is that the absorption of the drug from the intestinal system is very erratic. That is, if you take 1 gram of baclofen, it is possible that all the 1 gram goes out of the body. It gets excreted the next day morning. But so you cannot predict how much benefit it will cause. And the second thing is, there's something called as a blood-brain barrier. That is, The blood is here on one side and the brain is here on that side. There is something called a brain barrier in between these two. And this barrier does not allow everything to go into the brain. There's a protective mechanism nature has given. And baclofen is one drug which does not cross into the cross the barrier. And similarly, I'm sure probably you heard of, some antibiotics cannot cross. So whenever there's an infection in the brain, you have to give only very, very special antibiotics, not every antibiotic. Moreover, the other problem with baclofen is, most of the people develop severe side effects like headache, drowsiness, hallucinations, and all those. So practically oral baclofen is useless in the majority of the population. The other thing which is used, especially in very minimal spasticity, is what is called as botulinum toxin or Botox. Botox is actually a toxin produced by a bacteria called Clostridium botulinum. In fact, it is the biggest toxin known to human beings. Even very small dosage can kill a man, or even elephants can be killed with Botox. The Botox acts by paralyzing the muscles. So what we can do is, these injections can be used to paralyze a spastic muscle and preventing it from contracting. In small amounts, it is injected into carefully selected sites, determined based on the pattern of spasticity. It can last up to 12 to 6 weeks. Is a problem. It gets digested and absorbed because it's a protein. And not only that, new nerve endings will form and the muscle will no longer be inhibited by the Botox. That is, the action of Botox does not take place because new nerve endings always start sprouting up. Additionally, while Botox can be very helpful in selected situations, there's a limited number of injections that can be administered because, as I told you, beyond a dose, it is very dangerous. It can kill. And also because it's a protein, you require more and more higher doses as everything. So so in January, if you put, you need 1 milligram. In June, if you put it, you need 1.5 milligram. In say December, if you put it, you will need 2 milligram, like that. So the dose keeps on increasing. So you cannot use beyond that point. Electrical stimulation has been tried in case of spasticity, but the studies have shown that the results are always not consistent. So some people benefit, some people don't benefit. There's no way to say who will benefit, who will not benefit. Also, some group of muscles, like the bigger muscles, the elbow muscles and all benefit, but the smaller muscles which require more active, the thing does not benefit. So we'll come to the surgical methods. There are two surgical methods which have been there in the history. One is called selective dorsal rhizotomy, and second is intrathecal baclofen pump. Actually, when there's when nerves from the body, from the hands and the legs and all go to the spinal cord, I'm sure all of you know that. And when they are entering the spinal cord, they divide into two and go into the spinal cord like this. One is called the dorsal and second is called the ventral. The dorsal actually takes impulses into the spinal cord, and the ventral takes impulses, information from the spinal cord to the body, to the muscles, to the hands and legs. So this is how it works. And then they join together and they become one nerve, dorsal root. So information from these muscles don't go to the thing, and thus the spasticity is reduced. But this is a very old surgery, not used nowadays. And the reason is that, you cannot predict whether the spasticity will be controlled or not. It's what you call a luck-based surgery. And moreover, the complication rates are very high in up to 50%. In fact, I have 2 or 3 patients who I had to do surgery for the bladder because the urinary bladder got involved after the surgery. Either the spasticity came down, but the bladder got involved because these are all same nerves which supply the most of these organs. It is used mainly in patients with cerebral palsy because it has no effect on the upper limb. It is only for the lower limb. So if it cannot be used in conditions like stroke and all that, it is not used. So, intrathecal baclofen pump, that is, it is used in severe spasticity. As I said earlier, it should be used only when the Ashworth scale is 3 and 4. Less than some cases in 2. Less than 2, I generally don't advocate using the pump because it's a surgical procedure. I know that people can manage or with many other things than the pump. At the end of the day, it's still a surgery. It's a very simple surgery, 30, 40-minute surgery, but still it's a surgery. It is what we do is we put a pump under the skin of the abdomen here. See, you put a pump here under the abdomen, and this pump takes a tube under the skin into the spinal cord, and the drug is delivered directly into the spinal cord. It is usually given for those people who do not respond to oral baclofen or people who have significant side effects because of baclofen. What are the advantages of this system? One is Because it is given directly into the spinal cord, you require very minimum dosage. For example, most people take 30 milligram of tablet baclofen. But here you give just 25 microgram of baclofen. That is 1/1000 of the dose. So that way, most of the side effects are not there. And second is because it is given beyond the blood-brain barrier, it cannot come out and does not cause many of the systemic side effects like vomiting, drowsiness, and all that. The other thing is, this pump is so sophisticated that it can deliver 2 drops per 24 hours. That is 0.000 some one, I think 11 or 12 zeros, 16 ml per day. So you can imagine 2 drops per day. So it is so, and this delivers this drug for years together. So it's highly sophisticated pump. And this is continuous. Continuous means, say, for example, if somebody is on baclofen tablet, say you take a tablet at around 8 o'clock. So by 9 o'clock, the spasticity starts coming down if it is effective. And no side effects, you take the tablet as the spasticity comes down. And then by around 11:30, 12, the effect of the drug goes away. You again become stiff. So in that case, till your next dose may be around 3 p.m. So till 3 p.m. you are stiff. So this is a problem. This we call it breakthrough spasticity. But here the drug is delivered continuously 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So there is no problem with having this breakthrough problem. And the biggest advantage is from outside, we can adjust the dose using a computer, as a wireless computer, and we can increase the dose, decrease the dose based on the patient's requirement. And in fact, we can even give us a one-time 1 milligram, 2 milligram, 2 microgram dose, what we call as a bolus injection. So how do you say which patient is the candidate for surgery and which patient is not? We usually do what's called a trial injection. I'm sure at least some of the people know about spinal injection that is given for surgeries like cesarean and all that. Just like that, we do a lumbar puncture and put baclofen 25 to 100 microgram based on the body weight and many other parameters. We put into the spinal cord and see whether the patient will benefit from the surgery or not. So what we do is we do the Ashworth scale, then we do the injection, then we repeat the Ashworth scale hourly for 4 hours. So generally what happens is by about 2 hours, the spasticity becomes very less. And by 4 hours, your spasticity is back to where you started. It comes back. So this is double confirmation. So this is what I do so that I can say, yes, the spasticity was reduced because of my injection. And because the injection's effect has gone off by about 4 hours, back the spasticity has come back. So this is how I confirm that my injection is effective and the surgery will be effective for the patient. So this is a pump, as I told earlier. This is a pump which is put under the skin. It's a very small, it's the size of a palm like this. And this is a catheter, that the tube which goes under the skin into the spinal cord and delivers the drug. This is a central portal by which you can fill the drug whenever you want. It's usually 40 ml, and you require filling probably once in every year or so, or even less than that, once in 1.5 years and all that, depending on the dose. And this is very simple. Filling the pump is very simple. It's again done as an OPD procedure and hardly takes 5 minutes. This is a post-operative X-ray. There's a pump here under the skin of the abdomen. And if you can strain your eyes, you can see the catheter in the spinal cord. In patients who require the drug to go up to the upper limb also, like patients with stroke, we put the catheter a little more inside. We reach it up to the upper level so that the upper limb also is benefited. So just give you a few tips on living with spasticity. Managing spasticity with assistive devices, aids, and home adaptations can help enhance your safety. Physical and occupational therapists can recommend appropriate aids. Modifications in a home include ramps, grab bars, raised toilet seats, shower or tub bench, plastic adhesive strips on the bottom of the bathtub, braces, canes, wheelchairs, etc. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think that's a very nice and a short presentation, Doctor. There were some people also wanting to join in, but I think I don't know what's going wrong at my end. But as of now, I cannot get them in. So well, maybe another time. But anyway, that was an interesting presentation, and Well, we can open it to questions now. If anyone has questions, please put it across, and doctor will try to address them. Anandi ji is here, Jayanta is here, Selva, Debbie, and me. Anyone has any questions, or else I have some to ask. Okay, I will start, doctor. I just want you to know, doctor, in your experience, let's say, I'll take, a hypothetical question perhaps. Let's say
No
10
problem.
people come to you with a spasticity issue.
Okay.
How many of them qualify in your experience for such a treatment?
No, first we always assess the modified Ashworth scale.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if the Ashworth scale is more than 3 or 4, then only he is a candidate for surgery. Some patients with 2 and always 3 and 4, they will not benefit from any other treatment because the spasticity is so severe and so painful that the physiotherapy and other things won't help. So those patients only should come to me. Somebody with a spasticity of 1 or 2, mild 2 should not come to me for the surgery.
So can this scale, this measurement be done, let's say, by anyone? Or does it need to come
it can
to
be
you?
done by anyone, but all physiotherapists know this by heart because they learn it from the day one in their study. I think Janta and all know it better than their own names.
Okay, okay. So anyone who has a
But it is
spasticity,
easily available. In fact, anybody can measure. You can first for 3-4 times you will make mistakes, but 5th time obviously you will become all right. So we have learned so many things in life, no?
So if he
So you can learn also.
If he's above 3, let's say the scale is above 3, then he's a probable candidate, let's say, for the pump treatment.
Yes.
Or is he a, let's say, a certain candidate? Are there still some things which are uncertain?
No. Another thing I forgot to mention is, see, suppose somebody had a stroke, say January 1st, 2021. They should not come to me for the surgery, even if their spasticity is 4. Because there is always a chance for natural healing, because at least some of our friends had good natural healing. So I always tell them, don't call me before you are 6 months, and still at the end of 6 months, if the spasticity is 4, let us meet each other and see how things are. And I never operate before they are 9 months of severe spasticity.
Okay, so firstly, about 9 months have to pass from the onset of stroke.
Yes.
Let me flip the question. Let's say 2 years have passed. Will the
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Okay.
Doesn't matter, because basically the most important thing is these treatments are highly individualized.
Okay.
Just because it works for Mr. A doesn't mean that it will work for Mr. B. So that is why we do the trial, and the surgery is only an extension of the trial. In the trial, we do what you do is we put 1 ml. In the surgery, we are putting continuous. That's the only difference essentially. And so the surgery is an extension of the trial. So if the trial is positive, the patient will benefit. So if the trial is negative, obviously I will tell them, sorry, I will not operate. I will not do the surgery for you.
And this trial will last for how long? Days or something?
Two things. One is the drug is 40 ml capacity, the pump. That of course we can refill, but usually it goes on for about 1 to 1.5 years, because you are giving 2 drops per minute, and the 40 ml contains 40 into 16, that much drops.
Okay, I think
so there are thousands of drops.
Anandiji had a question. I think it's better. Anandiji, can you hear me, and you can ask your question?
I'm okay. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah. Go on, Anandi.
Okay. Doctor, you were talking about that scale. So who measures, what scale of spasticity is there for my...
No, that's what. See, that scale is called modified Ashworth scale.
Okay.
And it is usually done by the physiotherapist. Or sometimes, we doctors also do it.
Okay. So physiotherapists can do that and to let us know how much is the level of spasticity.
Yes, they should do it. Ideally, they should do it.
Okay. And what is the side effect of that surgery which you are talking about? Like,
Usually, sorry, complete
yeah,
your question.
like my husband was administered, no, there was a change in the medicine by the neurologist, and he had prescribed baclofen. Okay.
Okay.
And it did not work well because he had been taking it for about a week, but then there was too much of drowsiness and urine continence, which was not there
Yeah, no,
earlier.
I mentioned all that. In fact, no, I don't know whether you saw the earlier portion of the slides, but I had mentioned that very clearly. In most
Okay.
patients, tablet doesn't work.
You told us. So the
Yes.
doctor stopped it.
Yes.
The doctor decided to discontinue that medicine. But
Yes.
then with that pump, how long will it have again side effects?
No, because of two reasons. One is, again, I don't know whether you saw the earlier portion of the study, of the talk, but the two reasons is, one is there is something called as a blood-brain barrier.
You told us.
Yeah. So the drug cannot come out from inside the brain or the spinal cord to outside. Second is, we are giving microgram doses, microgram. That also, if you remember, I said, normally people give 30 to 40 milligram. Please hear it carefully, milligram. Whereas for the pump, we give microgram doses. So it is 1/1000th of a milligram.
So if taken for a very long, it doesn't have any side effects, basically.
No, it
But
doesn't.
It removes the spasticity.
Provided the trial is positive.
Okay.
It all depends, everything depends on the trial. If the trial is positive, then I will tell you, yes, madam, your person will get benefit from the surgery. If the trial is negative, I'll say, sorry, madam, I can't help you.
Okay. So
There's
this kind of surgery is done by you only, or it's done somewhere in Gurgaon, Delhi also?
See, the surgery is, many people claim that they can do the surgery, but the most important is selecting the correct patient. Okay. Because the surgeries can be done by a first year general surgery student, because it takes hardly 25 to 30 minutes. But most important is selecting the correct patient, and then still more important is managing the patient after the surgery, not immediately after surgery, but I'm talking about another 10 years, 20 years, 30 years.
Okay.
So that is where people fail. A lot of people have tried doing the surgery and have stopped it. I know at least 40 to 50 people who tried doing the surgery and then told me, no, Ram Narayan, you yourself do it. We don't want to get involved.
That means there has to be a follow-up continuously.
Yes. You cannot see, suppose you come to me, whether you like me or not, you still have to come to me only.
Okay.
You may curse, but you still will come to me.
Okay, just a follow up on that, doctor. Taking from your experience, let's say hypothetically, 10 people come and 10 are, let's say, cleared for surgery. So,
okay.
So then, of course, they have the surgery. All of them are successful after that. Generally speaking, they don't have any adverse effects. They can continue. What is your experience?
No. See, long term, there is no much of adverse effects. See, immediately after during surgery, like any surgery, you can get infection, you can get bleeding, you can have pump problems. It's a machine, it can always go wrong, things like that. Generally, long term, nothing happens. But one problem which we also, of course, I didn't mention many technical things which I thought may not be necessary for you. One thing is, this pump is under the skin, So I always see whether the skin is thick enough to hold the skin.
Yeah.
If the thin skin is not thick enough, the pump can come out of the skin. You understand? No, so I didn't go to those technical details because I thought there's a non-medical crowd, so they may get bored with those things. No, but yes, these are all rare, but usually does not happen. But theoretically can happen.
But to carry that line of thought further, normally once you feel that a patient is good enough for, you select that patient that is good enough for selection, and he undergoes the surgery, and then he remains with you, let's say, as you said, for the tenure next years.
Sorry, your voice broke. Can you repeat? It broke in between.
What I was saying, assuming that the process is gone through fully, patient selection is good, the surgery goes well, and he is continuously being monitored. then on an ongoing basis, spasticity is substantially reduced. Is that correct in my understanding?
No. Then I work with the physiotherapist to give them the correct amount of spasticity they require.
Okay. So in tandem with the physiotherapist, and he can more, let's say,
Yes,
able.
because I can adjust the dose. I can increase and decrease the dose.
Okay. And the patient has to be in touch with you for how many years in your, let's say, experience?
Generally, initially for some conditions like stroke and all that, first 6 months they want, because stroke and all are non-progressive. No, it depends on the basic pathology. Once somebody, say for example, if you take Parkinson and things like that, they have, because it's a progressive disease, they have to come back repeatedly. But stroke is not a progressive disease; it is stable. So after the first 6 months, after the drug is stabilized, patients generally I don't also ask them to come back to me unless they have a real problem.
Okay. Okay. And you said.
But I know it's a continuous arrangement between me and the patient. Always, they are free to come to me, and whenever I think they need to come to me, I call them and ask them to come.
And you're saying there is one pump which is used there, and is the pump? Is there a sole? I mean, is there a sole supplier for the pump? Is it Indian? Is it imported?
That is a big problem. That is the biggest negative problem. Is there's only one supplier in India. Of course, now outside in India, other 2 or 3 countries companies have come in, but in India there's only one company, and they charge miserably. So the surgery costs are much higher than most people. It is very difficult. That's the biggest problem that we all face. Is that we want to offer this to many patients, but we cannot because they cannot afford this. I think.
And this pump then obviously has.
Now I am talking with the Ministry of Health in Delhi as well as in Tamil Nadu, and slowly they are agreeing to take it up, because they officially, as another thing which I forgot to tell you is, this surgery is approved by the CGHS and ESI and the Indian Army and all these groups.
Okay, so what I think Ratnaji was asking. So is it covered under their schemes? They will reimburse the expense.
Yes, it is. It is reimbursed depending on the insurance that the patient pay. The premium that the patient pays.
Okay. For example, I can tell you ECHS, the Army ex-servicemen compulsory health scheme. Basically, they pay some amount, and then whatever the treatment is covered, irrespective of amount. There's no limit on that.
Yes, I think they have got a limit, 80%, 75%, something like that. That is covered, 100% covered.
Okay. And you have people
even ECHS. In fact, I was telling somebody, I have operated on a lot of this retired army men, bullet injuries and all that.
Okay. So they are obviously getting some compensation, at least a substantial amount from.
No, nice. Almost 75 to 80% they get reimbursed. That's what my knowledge is.
And this pump, again, to carry that line of thought further, this is a lifetime implant. It stays there.
It stays there for many years, but it runs for about 10 to 15 years. And there's a battery which runs the pump. The battery will run out. So probably in some people you may require to replace it, but that is once in 15 years or so.
Okay. And does basically there's no chance of the pump failing or any of the components inside the body failing with time?
No. There is always, it's a mechanical device, but it's all very, 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 I don't know how many varies I should say, very rare. But obviously it's a mechanical device. It can fail. But in the last, I did the first pump in 1999, and till date I've never had anybody coming back with a pump failure. And even if it fails, it's not a big issue. The company reimburses 100%, and they will get a new pump.
Okay, then the company, the agent reimburses. Is an agent there? It's okay.
They get the pump, the same pump they get without making any payment, because it's a company's fault.
Okay. Fine. Anyone else? Any other questions? I'll just, because I'm monopolizing, it seems. Anyone has a question? Generally,
Ratna, is real-time monitoring possible? Yes. But it is not yet connected to a mobile device as of now. I was told that the company is working on it, but till recently there is no such thing. It cannot be connected to this thing, because the problem is if by mistake the patient increases a dose, he will the whole leg will become flaccid, loose, and he can fall down and even create trouble. So generally, I think we don't want to connect it to any device, mobiles and all that.
Okay.
So we don't encourage patients to manipulate the pump. Or increases a dose or decreases a dose. If decreases, okay. Only thing is he will become spastic. But if he increases a dose, he can become so loose that he can fall down and he can end up in trouble. So we generally don't encourage patients to handle the pump. Manipulate the pump, rather.
But can he manipulate the pump, or can it be done accidentally?
There is actually, we give a computer mouse like thing, but I don't give to anybody. That's the thing, yes, available.
Okay.
But I don't want to give it to especially our Indian patients. They are ready for funny people, They can be, if time permits, of course, not this pump. I did one surgery for a DMK minister. And, after 3 days, I got a threatening call saying that, you have operated for the minister, you have taken 15 lakhs and the minister is now in a very bad shape.
Oh.
I tried to do anything, but I couldn't. So I say, and that is not here. That is in Madurai, about 600 kilometers from here. So I sent my man down there, and he called me and said, "Sir, yesterday night he has put off the battery."
Oh.
And I was somebody told me that they are coming to cut my hands and legs away. The politicians.
Oh.
So I generally don't want to give it to our people. They misuse it.
No, okay. As far as time is concerned, we have had a time extension. I think Zoom has been kind to us.
Oh, okay, great. Then you please ask questions.
Yes. So if anyone has any other question on spasticity, Debbie, you are there. You are new to the group, or Jayanta or Purnima ji, I'm seeing. Spasticity, or we have a neurosurgeon of repute here. Anything else to do with stroke? Maybe we can widen the scope a bit. Anyone has any questions? Please feel free. So obviously, doctor, you are doing other surgeries also besides this, right?
Yes.
This is one of
I do a lot of other surgeries. That is, I do surgeries for Parkinson, autism. I do surgery for addiction. I do surgery for obesity. I do the same baclofen pump for various other conditions. As I said earlier, cerebral palsy. I do the same for many neurological disorders where there is paralysis of the legs and the hands, spinal cord injury. The same pump can be used for other medicines. For example, there's a problem called cancer pain, or what is called failed back surgery pain. That is, cancer pain, I'm sure you can understand. Failed back surgery pain means somebody has a back pain, they go and get operated, but the pain does not go away or comes back with a vengeance. So there you put morphine instead of baclofen into the pump. The pump is a universal pump. You can put any drugs into it. So then I do what's called spinal cord stimulation for various conditions. In fact, I do this aggressively for two situations. One is what is called refractory angina. That is, if you take 100 patients with the heart disease, ischemic heart disease, about 35% of them will be benefited by just medicines and lifestyle modification, like stop smoking, reduce weight, things like that. Another 30% will do very well with angioplasty. Another 25 is sent to surgery, bypass surgery. Rather, they do very well with bypass surgery. But there remains always 15 to 20% of people who do not benefit from any one of these. Those people, I stimulate the spinal cord, that the nerves go into the heart at the spinal cord level and give them a normal life. Again, I operate for problems with people having difficulty in controlling their urine and motion and all that. I operate for people who have diabetes and their legs, I'm sure you heard of situation where people's legs and toes and get cut off because there's no blood supply to the leg. I operate on the nerves and open up the blood vessels so that they lose the pain is also disappears, and the legs also are preserved. Like that, so many surgeries I do.
Okay. I think we have two questions. I'll just take it. Ratnaji is asking, is this procedure, first is the stroke registry in India functional? I don't know. We can come back to that. Second,
I also don't know.
Is this procedure included in the national stroke guidelines?
That also I don't know. That also is not there, because the problem is There is a total lack of awareness even among the top neurologists in this country about this procedure. Second thing is, this surgery is basically not for stroke alone. This is a surgery for basically spasticity, not for stroke. It so happens that some people with stroke also has spasticity, but it is not for everybody. So I don't know whether it will get involved. It is put in the stroke list. And second thing is, this surgery is done probably 1 year, 2 years, 5 years after the stroke. I don't know whether it is really possible. I don't know. Second is, Purnima has asked the question, does it have effects on the autonomic nervous system? Generally, no, because Purnima has a medical background. I'll put a little more medical input into this. See, basically, baclofen acts via the GABA system. The GABA system in the spinal cord and the brain. The GABA system has action only on the muscle, tone, and spasticity. It does not have any role in the autonomic nervous system. So it doesn't affect. But there are so many patients who have spastic urinary bladder. So for example, that madam was saying, her husband developed incontinence. So spastic bladder, it works. So after the pump, a lot of people who are in this, after stroke or after this thing, especially this is very common in spinal cord injury, where the bladder also becomes very stiff and the patients cannot control their urine. Once you put the pump, they start passing urine normal, which is a very big relief for this type of patient. Okay, another question somebody asked us, how many stroke patients are tried with this pump mechanism? In fact, I have recently published a paper on some patients which was which I had attached to our group. Anybody is interested can please go and see the group. Sorry, see the paper. Of course, if somebody wants and they shares their email, I can send the paper also to them. And then total cost will be about 8 to 9 lakh rupees depending on the dollar rate, because as I told, this is an important thing. And most importantly, if suppose you come to me tomorrow morning and say, doctor, I want the surgery immediately, I cannot do the surgery because I need 1 week to 10 days to get the implant from the US. So this is not freely available in the market. Just like other implants, so many implants are used, like knee joint, orthopedic implants, so many implants. You cannot buy it in the market because nobody keeps it in their stock because it's not used that commonly. And second thing is it's costly. And of the cost of the 8 to 9 lakhs, 80% of the cost is the pump. Surgery is very simple. The surgery lasts, as I told, less than an hour. And if it's done very early in the morning, you can go home in the night. Or maximum next day morning, you are out of the hospital. So those things don't cost much. And I don't usually put in the ICU and all that. They generally stay in the room only. They walk around, have a normal dinner. And the next day morning, have their, the only thing is they don't have a bath, but the routine other things are allowed and they just walk out of the hospital. 95% of the patients walk out of the hospital.
Okay. Now coming back to, the approximate success rate that I think Jagdeep has asked, I would think that based upon the, let's say, the procedures, the selection procedures, etc., that you are having, normally speaking, it should be pretty high. There should not be any complications, unless there are complications. What would you say to that?
Yes. No, success is assured because I don't operate if the success is not assured.
Okay.
I do the trial. The trial is positive because, as I said earlier, the surgery is an extension of the trial. See, surgery, I'm putting 1 ml or 2 ml or whatever it is. Here, I'm putting continuously through the pump. So, if the trial is positive, generally the surgery should not fail.
And in case if you are aware, is there a similar procedure being adopted like trial and selection, let's say by other hospitals or neurosurgeons, etc., or is it a
that is the international recommendation, but this is India.
Okay, but the standard international protocol is that you firstly have a trial and then only go to further.
In fact, if you really think the patient first trial is negative, but you still think out of your experience that the patient is a disordering candidate, you do what you call an extended trial, where you admit the patient and put the baclofen over 1 day, 2 days, 3 days like that. There are multiple trials. Of course, again, I didn't want to go into the details of that because, these are all too technical for the non-medical audience. But unless a trial is positive, you should not do the surgery. Plus, of course, you always get the opinion of other doctors, the cardiologists, the other people. They all should say, yes, go ahead, no problem.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's not that everybody gets operated. No, everybody, suppose I see 10 people with spasticity, it's possible that I may operate only 6 or 7 back.
Mhm. Mhm.
A lot of people get rejected.
Okay.
But I feel that, it's better to have a 100% good results rather than say that, I did 100,000 surgeries.
Naturally, yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because long-term results matter, not the numbers.
Okay. I think Purnima is asking one question. You can see that, doctor, and address that maybe.
Generally, the all medications are tried by the neurologist, not with me. They generally try it, and as I said earlier, oral medications, if tolerated well, I request them to continue for 9 months to 1 year. Then only they should come to me. The patient should not just walk into me and say, yes, tomorrow morning, let us get operated.
So firstly, oral medications, and in case oral medications are not working, then perhaps one should look at
Yes.
kind of surgical interventions. Yes.
Exactly. The criteria are all very clear. It is not that you just come in and do the surgery. There are so many things we exclude before we really offer the surgery. So I think I mentioned almost everything. But it's not that, that is why that's other reason for success, because generally there's a teaching in the surgery, whichever surgery. I'm not talking about neurosurgery or backless implant. Patient selection is the most important step of any surgery. And here I spent a lot of time in selecting the patient. In fact, patients, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks for me to finally tell the patient, yes, you go ahead with the surgery, you will benefit. Or no, don't do the surgery, you won't benefit.
I think Ratna is asking in terms of quality of laming, I think. Is there what percentage of change is seen?
Yeah, I would request, of course, I don't remember the numbers, but I would request Ratna to go back to my paper, which is a reflection of the thing. See, but the problem is there's not much of literature in the world about this. Mine is one of the first from India. And again, there's a lot of paucity of literature on this because not much people are doing it. Only now people are slowly learning to do this. And the quality of life, it is very good. In the selected patients, it's very good. And most important is, again, I want to impress on people very clearly, the surgery is not the final thing. Surgery is only one step. After the surgery, the patient will have to go back to the physiotherapist, the occupational therapist, and all that, and continue the process and learn many things. But that time, because there's no spasticity and there's no pain, patients are comfortable and very cooperative. So that is very important. It's not that, I do surgery today and tomorrow morning you can run around and play football and all that. No, my surgery is only one step of the whole process. That is why, as I said earlier, there's a lot of team members involved in the thing. In fact, I was discussing with Jayanta the other day. Jayanta, if you remember. Hello, Jayanta.
Right, sir. I'm listening to you.
Yeah.
And,
you remember discussing these points.
It's true that that the rehabilitation part is also very important, as I have learned from you. That after the surgery, the occupational therapists and physiotherapists have a lot of things to do to relearn all that has been forgotten. And that's the most important part that I was thinking, that if a patient, mostly after stroke, if we take for example, that after a stroke, a considerable period of 2 years have passed, a lot of psychological changes come into being. And these changes make the patient very lethargic and very at home with the situation in beds in most of the people, I find. And it becomes very hard to bring them back or to normalcy or bring them back to the initial life unless they have a personal fillip or personal impetus like that. So really, it works for rather younger patients. I feel like that, where they have the urge to come back to normalcy.
No. In fact, that is where, as I said earlier, a lot of neurosurgeons tried this and failed, but I am successful for the reason that I practically call the patient every month, call the physiotherapist and ask them how they are doing. And if they are not doing their exercise, I use all the techniques. I persuade them, I shout at them, I threaten them, I do everything. That is why I am able to get success, because that's almost a long process. It takes a long time. In fact, many patients I call back and in fact ask them to come and make them use a sentimental approach, call their children and ask them to talk to the parents like that. So many approaches I do, and that is why when I have this type of patients, I give them full half an hour consultation, full half an hour. They just don't come in, medicines written and get pushed out.
Yes, of course. One's determination and effort is also, very, very. I mean, that's, I would say, the imagine.
Motivating the patient is very important.
And I think Siva is asking, how long does the pump stay in the body? Is it
Yes.
date or is it a lifetime thing?
Yeah, see, basically it depends on the disease. If the disease is something which is temporary, you can always remove the pump. But in conditions like stroke or spinal cord injury and all that, you cannot, because the disease cannot be changed. This surgery is only a rehabilitative surgery. It is not a curative surgery. It is only making your life better. It's not changing anything in the disease per se. So if you are suffering, you will take some of the suffering away, but that doesn't take away the problem. The problem remains there. So basically, as somebody had mentioned, QL, quality of life, that's what Ratna said. We are improving the quality of life. That's all.
And Ratna,
What is the age range?
Yeah.
Actually, we don't operate after 70 or 70, 75, we don't operate.
Okay.
And that is like any other surgery, because after 75 there will be a lot of other problems, heart problems, lung problems. So most of the people, elderly people, will have problems. But I have done this surgery for a 92-year-old man also. But those are all what you call, quite rare, very uncommon, unheard of surgery. And that man lived for another 5 years, and one day didn't get up at all.
And he was also a stroke patient, or that was some other disease that you did?
No, he was having, he had cervical spondylosis and he fell down and had a spinal cord.
Okay. Okay. Fine. I think we have had a very, I would say, intensive session, many questions, a lot of interest. Anyone has any other question or aspect to talk about now? We have some time. Zoom has been kind. Anything that you want to talk about? We can probably have a freewheeling discussion, or the doctor can address, or Ratnaji, of course, is here with us, and Jayanta is also here. They are also well experienced in stroke management, etc. Punima is here. Anything that we want to talk about, or should we close the meeting?
Sir, before we close, I'd just like to ask Dr. Ramnarayan that I'm not sure whether it is a good question or not. We are getting cases of the deep brain stimulation, DBS, in case of Parkinson's disease. So are these two operations similar, or is it a quite different approach, this DBS and cathecral baclofen pump?
DBS is a brain surgery. This is done at the lower abdomen, lower end, almost near your hip. In fact, they may be as far between Chennai and Calcutta.
So in that case, the people with Parkinson's, they can go for this surgery instead of going for DBS?
No, because in Parkinson's disease, it is rigidity. Here, we are treating for spasticity. The conditions are totally different.
Right.
Parkinson's patients will not benefit from this surgery. In fact, they may even deteriorate.
But people with multiple sclerosis, they will benefit.
Yes, because there they get spasticity of the legs. So the word is spasticity. It doesn't matter what is the disease. Spasticity, severe spasticity, no other things are working. This pump can be an option.
Okay. Fine. Anything else?
Provided you satisfy many other criteria, the pump can be an option.
Fine. I think we will close then. Thank you very much, Dr. Ram Narayan. I think it's been
Thank you all.
very, very interesting session. I think we all, at least I have learned many new things, and I'm sure many of us have, which will help us.
So those people who could not join for various reasons, if they have questions, they can always call me after 8 o'clock, between 8 and 9 in the evening. I'll be more than happy to answer the questions. Or as they can share I am willing to share my email with them. They can shoot all the questions in an email, which will probably be more comfortable for me. I can answer them. Definitely. I am willing to answer any questions on this topic at any time.
You can put it on the group, your contact coordinates, email ID.
Sure.
Certainly, anyone who wants to approach you later, they can be
Yes.
in touch with you.
Yes.
And we can take it further. Fine. I think
Yes.
then we are going to close the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone. Stay safe and
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Dr. Ram Narayan, again.
Thank you, friends. Have a good night.
Yeah, and I'll be putting a synopsis of this meeting. It has been recorded. I'll be putting a synopsis. I'll see how to maybe edit it. It will go
Sure.
to the channel also sometime in the future.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay then.
Okay.
All the best,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you very much. Bye. Bye.